The Pacific Ocean roared against the cliffs as Ethan Sinclair stepped out of his silver Tesla. The salty air hit his face, and he frowned. Seabrook Bay was everything he despised about small towns. Quaint coffee shops with handwritten menus. People who smiled at strangers. Dogs running freely on the beach without designer leashes. Ethan adjusted his platinum watch and checked his phone. 3 missed calls from his board of directors. He ignored them all. His tech empire could wait. He needed this manuscript, a first-edition philosophy text his mentor had requested before retirement. The only copy available sat in some forgotten bookstore in this tiny coastal village. He walked down Main Street, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the cobblestones. Children played near a fountain. An elderly couple held hands on a bench. Ethan felt like he had stepped into a painting he would never purchase. Then he saw it. Bennett's books. The sign was weathered but charming, hanging above a blue door with a brass handle. Through the window, he could see shelves packed with books reaching toward the ceiling. He pushed the door open, and a small bell chimed. The smell hit him first. Old paper, vanilla candles, and something else. Something that felt like coming home, though Ethan had never truly had one. Classical music played softly from speakers he could not see. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, creating golden pools on the wooden floor. She appeared from behind a bookshelf, carrying a stack of hardcovers against her chest. Rosalie Bennett wore faded jeans and a cream sweater that looked soft as clouds. Her auburn hair was twisted into a messy bun, and reading glasses perched on her nose. She was not wearing makeup. She was not trying to impress anyone. And somehow, that made her more beautiful than any woman Ethan had encountered in years. Their eyes met. Hers were green, the color of sea glass after a storm. She did not gasp. She did not blush. She simply asked in a voice like honey, "Can I help you find something?" Ethan found himself momentarily speechless. He cleared his throat. "I called yesterday about the Kierkegaard collection." Recognition flickered in her eyes. "Ah, yes. The gentleman from San Francisco? Follow me." She turned and walked deeper into the store. Ethan followed, watching the graceful way she moved between shelves she clearly knew by heart. She stopped at a glass case in the back corner. "Here it is," Rosalie said, carefully removing a leather-bound volume. First edition, 1843. The pages are fragile, but the binding is remarkably intact. She handed him the book with such care, as if passing him something sacred. Ethan took it, and their fingers touched. The contact lasted barely a second, but he felt electricity shoot up his arm. "You treat books like they are alive," he observed. Rosalie smiled, and it transformed her entire face. "Because in a way, they are. Every book carries the heartbeat of its author, the breath of every person who has ever read it. When you open these pages, you are touching history." Ethan had spent millions on art he barely looked at, on cars he rarely drove, on penthouses he never stayed in. But this woman spoke about a dusty old book with more passion than he had felt about anything in a decade. "That is a beautiful way to see the world," he said. Quietly, she studied him with those intelligent green eyes. "You do not see it that way." It was not a question. Somehow she had looked past his expensive suit and seen the emptiness beneath. "I see investments, returns, profit margins," Ethan admitted with unusual honesty. "Beauty has always seemed like a luxury I could not afford or would not allow yourself." The question hit him harder than any business negotiation. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it again. Rosalie adjusted her glasses. "I am sorry. That was too personal. You came here for a book, not a philosophy lesson from a stranger." "No," Ethan said quickly. "Please, continue." She hesitated, then spoke. "I think some people build walls so high that sunlight cannot reach them anymore. They convince themselves the darkness is safety. But really, they are just afraid of what might happen if they let themselves feel again." Ethan felt something crack inside his chest. This woman, this small-town bookstore owner he had known for 5 minutes, had just described his entire existence. "How much for the book?" he asked, his voice rougher than intended. $4,000. He pulled out his wallet and handed her a black card without blinking. "Keep the change." Rosalie frowned. The book costs 4,000. I do not need charity. It is not charity. Consider it payment for the conversation. Our conversation was free, she replied firmly, processing exactly $4,000. We do not charge people for being human here, Ethan laughed. An actual, genuine laugh that surprised them both. You are unlike anyone I have ever met. Is that a compliment or an insult? I have not decided yet. Rosalie wrapped the book in protective tissue paper, then placed it in a sturdy box. As she worked, Ethan found himself memorizing details. The small scar on her left hand, the silver bracelet around her wrist with a tiny book charm, the way she bit her lower lip when concentrating. Do you live here? He asked in Seabrook Bay. My whole life. I inherited this store from my grandmother 3 years ago.
Oh.
Have you ever wanted to leave? Rosalie paused, her hands resting on the wrapped book. Every day and never. I dream of Paris bookstores and London libraries. But this place holds every memory of the people I have loved. Leaving would feel like abandoning them, even if they are gone. She looked up at him and he saw grief there. Old grief, the kind that becomes part of your bones. Especially because they are gone. Someone has to remember. Ethan understood that more than she knew. He had spent his life trying to forget his past. This woman spent hers honoring it. She handed him the boxed book. I hope your mentor enjoys it. I hope so too. Ethan took the package but did not move toward the door. Can I ask you something inappropriate? Rosalie raised an eyebrow. That depends on your definition of inappropriate. Have dinner with me tonight. She blinked, clearly surprised. I do not even know your name, Ethan Sinclair. Recognition dawned in her eyes. The tech billionaire. I read about you in the business section. Do not believe everything you read. They said you were ruthless, calculating, and emotionally unavailable. Ethan winced. All right, believe some of it, Rosalie laughed, a sound like wind chimes. I appreciate the offer, but I do not think we are looking for the same things. What am I looking for? A distraction. Maybe a beautiful challenge. Someone different from your usual world. And what are you looking for? She met his gaze steadily. Someone who wants to feel again. Not someone who is afraid of it. The words struck him silent. She had done it again, seen straight through him to the truth he kept hidden. You are right, Ethan admitted. I am afraid. I have been afraid for so long, I forgot what it feels like to be anything else. Something softened in Rosalie's expression. Then maybe you should start with being honest, instead of diving into dinner invitations. I am being honest. For the first time in years, I am being completely honest. You terrify me. You make me want things I swore I would never want again, and I have absolutely no idea what to do about it. Rosalie studied him for a long moment. Then she smiled, soft and gentle. How about we start with coffee? Tomorrow morning, if you are still in town, relief flooded through Ethan, I will be here. The Sunrise Cafe, 8 o'clock. Do not be late. I am never late. Somehow, I believe you. Ethan left the bookstore with the manuscript tucked under his arm and a strange lightness in his chest. He sat in his car for 10 minutes, just staring at the storefront, watching Rosalie move through the windows like a dancer who knew every step by heart. He had come to Seabrook Bay for a book. He was leaving with something far more valuable. A crack in the armor he had worn for decades, and the terrifying, exhilarating possibility that maybe, just maybe, he could learn to feel again. Ethan arrived at the Sunrise Cafe at 7:45. He had not slept well, his mind replaying every word Rosalie had spoken. He wore casual clothes, jeans, and a navy sweater, trying not to look like the billionaire everyone expected. Through the window, he could see her already sitting at a corner table, reading a book with a steaming mug beside her. When he walked in, she looked up and smiled. That smile did something to his carefully constructed defenses, like sunlight melting ice that had frozen for years. You came early, Rosalie observed as he sat across from her. I told you, I am never late. Early is not the same as on time. It means you were eager. Ethan felt his lips curve into a smile. You are very observant. Read people the way I read books. Sometimes the spaces between words tell you more than the words themselves. A waitress appeared, a cheerful woman named Margaret who clearly knew Rosalie well. They chatted like old friends before Margaret turned to Ethan with curious eyes. "What can I get you, honey? Black coffee, please? Nothing to eat?" Ethan shook his head, but Rosalie interrupted. "Bring him the cinnamon rolls. Trust me." Margaret winked and disappeared. Ethan raised an eyebrow at Rosalie. "You order for strangers often?" "Only when I know they need something sweet in their lives." When the cinnamon roll arrived, warm and dripping with icing, Ethan understood. He took one bite and closed his eyes. It tasted like childhood memories he thought he had lost. "Like Saturday mornings before everything fell apart? Good?" Rosalie asked, amusement dancing in her green eyes. "Incredible." They talked for 2 hours. Rosalie told him about growing up in Seabrook Bay, about summer nights catching fireflies and winter mornings building snowmen on the beach when rare storms rolled in. She spoke about her grandmother, who had taught her that every book was a portal to another life. "She used to say that reading was the closest thing to magic we had in this world," Rosalie said softly. "You could be anyone, go anywhere, feel everything, all while sitting in the same chair." "Your grandmother sounds like a remarkable woman." "She was. She taught me that love was not about grand gestures. It was about showing up every day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard." Ethan felt something tighten in his throat. "My parents never taught me anything about love. They taught me about winning, about crushing competition, about never showing weakness. Is that why you built such tall walls?" He looked into his coffee cup, seeing his reflection distorted in the dark liquid. "When I was 12, I told my father I wanted to be a writer. He laughed and said dreamers end up poor. He enrolled me in business school instead. By 16, I was working in his company. By 25, I had started my own. By 30, I had surpassed his entire empire. Did that make you happy?" "It made me successful. That is not what I asked." Ethan met her gaze. Those green eyes saw too much, understood too deeply. "No, it did not make me happy. But happiness always seemed like something other people had, not something I deserved." Rosalie reached across the table and placed her hand over his. The touch was gentle, grounding, real. "Everyone deserves happiness, Ethan, even people who have convinced themselves otherwise." They spent the next week together. Ethan canceled meetings, ignored urgent emails, let his assistant handle crises that suddenly seemed insignificant compared to walking along the beach with Rosalie as waves crashed against the shore. She showed him her world. The hidden tide pools where starfish clung to rocks. The lighthouse on the cliff where she went to think. The small library where she volunteered reading to children every Thursday afternoon. Ethan watched her with those kids. Saw how her face lit up as she brought stories to life with different voices and animated gestures. The children adored her, hanging on every word. And something inside him, something he thought had died long ago, stirred back to life. "You were wonderful with them," he said afterward as they walked through the park. Rosalie blushed. "They make it easy." Children still believe in magic. They have not learned to be cynical yet. "Were you always this optimistic?" She stopped walking and turned to face him. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink behind her. "No. After my parents died in a car accident when I was 19, I was angry at the world. I stopped reading, stopped believing in anything good. My grandmother sat with me every night for 6 months, reading aloud until I remembered why stories mattered. She taught me that hope is a choice, not a feeling." Ethan felt his heart break for the girl she had been, alone and grieving. "I am sorry you went through that." "Me too. But pain taught me something important. It taught me that we can survive anything if we let people help carry the weight. I've never let anyone help me carry anything." "I know," Rosalie said gently. "That is why you look so tired." No one had ever said anything like that to him before. No one had ever looked past the success and power to see the exhausted man underneath. That evening, Ethan took her to the lighthouse. They climbed the spiral staircase, their footsteps echoing in the narrow tower. At the top, The view stretched endlessly. Ocean meeting sky, stars beginning to appear as darkness fell. "I come here when the world feels too heavy," Rosalie said, leaning against the railing. "Something about being this high reminds me how small my problems really are." Ethan stood beside her, close enough that their arms touched. "Your problems are never small if they hurt you." She turned to look at him. The lighthouse beam swept across her face, illuminating her features in flashes. "You are different than I expected." "How so?" "The articles said you were cold, unfeeling. But I see someone who feels too much and has spent his whole life pretending he does not." Ethan felt exposed, vulnerable in a way he had never allowed himself to be. "You scare me, Rosalie Bennett." "Why?" "Because you make me want to tear down every wall I have built. You make me want to be the man I could have been if life had not taught me to be hard." The wind whipped around them, carrying the smell of salt and seaweed. Rosalie reached up and touched his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw with heartbreaking tenderness. "What if being hard is not strength?" she whispered. "What if real strength is letting yourself be soft with someone who will not break you?" Ethan could not breathe, could not think, could only feel the warmth of her hand against his skin, the intensity of her gaze holding his. "I do not know how to do that," he admitted. "Then let me teach you." He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away. She did not. Their lips met softly at first, a question being asked and answered, then deeper, more urgent, as if they were both drowning and had finally found air. Rosalie tasted like cinnamon and hope. Her hand slid into his hair, pulling him closer. Ethan wrapped his arms around her waist, lifting her slightly off the ground. The kiss was everything he had never let himself want. Raw, honest, terrifying, perfect. When they finally separated, both breathless, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. His heart pounded so hard he was sure she could feel it. "I have not kissed anyone like that in 10 years, he confessed. "Why not?" "Because kissing means caring. Caring means vulnerability. Vulnerability means someone can hurt you." Rosalie cupped his face in both hands, making him look at her. "I could hurt you, Ethan. You could hurt me. That is the risk of letting someone in. But the alternative is spending your whole life alone, safe but empty. Is that really living?" He thought about his penthouse in San Francisco. Glass and steel, expensive art on the walls, everything perfectly arranged and completely lifeless. He thought about eating dinner alone every night, sleeping in a bed meant for two, waking up to silence that echoed with everything he refused to feel. "No," he said quietly, "that is not living. That is just existing. So what do you want to do about it?" Ethan pulled her close again, burying his face in her hair. She smelled like books and vanilla and home. "I want to try. I want to learn how to let you in, even though it terrifies me." "Good," Rosalie murmured against his chest. "Being terrified means you are doing something that matters." They stayed at the lighthouse until the stars covered the entire sky. Ethan told her things he had never told anyone. About the loneliness of his childhood. About the first business deal that made him feel powerful. About the moment he realized success had not filled the emptiness inside him. Rosalie listened without judgment, her hand holding his, her presence steady and grounding. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Thank you for trusting me with that," she finally said. "Thank you for not running away," she smiled. "I do not run from things that matter. And you, Ethan Sinclair, you matter more than you know." Those words settled into his chest, taking root in soil that had been barren for decades. For the first time since he could remember, Ethan felt something blooming inside him. Something fragile and new and absolutely worth protecting. He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring every second. The lighthouse beam swept around them in steady circles, a heartbeat of light in the darkness. And in that moment, wrapped in her arms, Ethan finally understood what it meant to come home. The following days blurred into something Ethan had never experienced before. Pure, uncomplicated joy. He extended his stay in Seabrook Bay indefinitely, renting a cottage overlooking the ocean. His assistant called daily with emergencies that suddenly seemed manageable from a distance. His board demanded his presence at meetings he attended via video call, Sitting on a porch with seagulls crying in the background, Rosalie filled his days with simple pleasures he had forgotten existed. Morning walks on the beach, collecting shells. Afternoon tea in her bookstore, while rain drummed against the windows. Evening dinners at small restaurants where everyone knew her name and welcomed him with cautious warmth. But Ethan knew this bubble could not last forever. Reality waited in San Francisco, demanding his return, and he had not yet told Rosalie the complete truth about his world. One Saturday morning, he woke to find a text message from his brother, someone he had not spoken to in 5 years. The message contained a single link to a gossip website. Ethan's stomach dropped as he opened it. The headline screamed in bold letters, "Tech Titan Ethan Sinclair's secret romance with small-town nobody." Below were photos of them walking on the beach, holding hands, kissing outside her bookstore. The article was cruel, mocking Rosalie's simple lifestyle, speculating about gold digging, questioning what a sophisticated billionaire could possibly want with a provincial bookworm. Ethan felt rage surge through him. He wanted to sue, to destroy the publication, to make them pay for every vicious word. But more than that, he felt fear. Fear that Rosalie would see this, fear that his world would poison the beautiful thing they had built. He drove to the bookstore, his hands gripping the steering wheel too tightly. Through the window, he could see Rosalie at the counter, laughing with a customer. She looked so happy, so untouched by the ugliness that followed him everywhere. The bell chimed as he entered. Rosalie's smile faded when she saw his face. What happened? She asked immediately, walking around the counter. Ethan handed her his phone without speaking. He watched her face as she read, saw the color drain from her cheeks, saw her hands begin to shake. They do not even know me. How can they write these things? Because that is what they do. They destroy anything beautiful and call it news. Ethan took the phone back, his jaw clenched. I am sorry. I should have warned you. My life comes with cameras and gossip and people who think they have the right to judge everything I do. Rosalie was quiet for a long moment. Then she looked up at him with those green eyes that saw everything. Is this why you have been alone for so long? Because you did not want to subject someone you cared about to this? Partly. Also because I never cared about anyone enough to worry about it before. She reached for his hand. And now? Now I am terrified that this will scare you away. That you will realize being with me means giving up your privacy, your peace, your simple, beautiful life.
Oh.
Rosalie squeezed his fingers. You do not get to make that decision for me, Ethan. I am a grown woman. I can decide what I am willing to sacrifice. You should not have to sacrifice anything. Love always requires sacrifice. The question is whether the person is worth it. Ethan felt his breath catch. Is that what this is? Love? Rosalie smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. I have been falling in love with you since the moment you walked into my store and looked lost. I tried to fight it, told myself we were too different, that it could never work. But the heart does not listen to logic. Ethan pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly he could feel her heartbeat against his chest. I love you. I did not know I was capable of it anymore, but you showed me. You taught me how to feel again. They stood there, wrapped in each other, while the world outside prepared to tear them apart. Ethan knew the article was just the beginning. More would come, worse would follow. His enemies would use Rosalie to hurt him. His world would try to swallow her whole. Come with me to San Francisco, he said suddenly, pulling back to look at her face. Let me show you my life. The real version, not the one in the articles. Then you can decide if it is something you can live with. Rosalie hesitated. What about the bookstore? We will hire someone to manage it for a week. Please, Rosalie. I need you to see everything before you decide if I am worth the trouble. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, show me your world. 3 days later, they flew to San Francisco in Ethan's private jet. Rosalie sat by the window, watching clouds drift past with wonder in her eyes. She had never flown before, had never left the California coast. Everything was new and overwhelming and exciting. When they landed, a car waited to take them to his penthouse. Rosalie was silent as they drove through the city. taking in the towering buildings, the crowded streets, the chaos that was so different from Seabrook Bay. His penthouse occupied the top floor of a glass tower. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the bay and the Golden Gate Bridge. Everything was modern, expensive, perfect, and completely sterile. Rosalie walked through the space slowly, touching surfaces, examining art pieces, looking for something personal. She found almost nothing. No photographs, no mementos, no signs that an actual human lived there. "This is where you live?" she asked quietly. "This is where I sleep," Ethan corrected. "I have not truly lived anywhere in a long time." That evening, he took her to a charity gala. It was a test, he knew, throwing her into the deep end of his world. But he wanted her to see it all, to understand what being with him truly meant. Rosalie wore a simple black dress she had brought from home. Among the designer gowns and glittering jewelry, she should have looked out of place. Instead, she outshone everyone. Her natural beauty, her genuine smile, her complete lack of pretension made every other woman in the room seem artificial. Ethan introduced her to colleagues, investors, rivals. Some were warm, curious about the woman who had captured his attention. Others were cold, dismissive, making subtle comments designed to make her feel small. He watched Rosalie handle it all with grace. She did not pretend to understand their world. She did not try to fit in. She was simply herself, honest and kind and real. And slowly, people began gravitating toward her, drawn to something authentic in a room full of masks. But the breaking point came when an ex-girlfriend approached. Monica Hartwell, a socialite Ethan had dated briefly 3 years ago. She was beautiful in the way magazine covers demanded, all sharp edges and calculated charm. "Ethan, darling," Monica purred, kissing his cheek while ignoring Rosalie completely. "I heard you were slumming it with some small-town girl. How delightfully eccentric of you." Ethan felt fury rise in his throat, but before he could speak, Rosalie stepped forward. "Hello, I am Rosalie Bennett, the small-town girl. And you must be someone who thinks cruelty makes them interesting." Monica's smile faltered. "Excuse me?" "You are excused. Now, if you will move aside, I need some air." Rosalie walked away, her head held high. Ethan followed, leaving Monica standing alone with her mouth open. He found Rosalie on the balcony, gripping the railing, her shoulders shaking. When he touched her arm, she turned, and he saw tears streaming down her face. "I cannot do this," she whispered. "I cannot be someone I am not. I cannot smile at people who look at me like I am dirt on their expensive shoes. This is your world, Ethan, and I do not belong in it." Ethan felt his heart shatter. "Then I will leave it." Rosalie blinked, confused. "What?" "If you cannot live in my world, then I will leave it behind. I will move to Seabrook Bay. I will sell the company, sell the penthouse, sell everything. Because none of it matters without you. You cannot do that. This is your life, your legacy," Ethan said fiercely, taking her face in his hands. "This is my prison. You are my life. You are the only thing that has ever made me feel alive. I would give up every dollar, every building with my name on it, every meaningless achievement, if it meant keeping you." Rosalie sobbed, pressing her face against his chest. "But what if you resent me later? What if you miss all of this? I have had all of this for 20 years, and I have been miserable every single day. I have had you for 3 weeks, and I have been happy for the first time in my life. That is not a difficult choice." They stood there, holding each other while the party continued inside. The city lights sparkled below them, a million lives being lived, a million stories unfolding. And in that moment, Ethan knew with absolute certainty that he was making the right choice. "I am scared," Rosalie admitted. "Me too. But maybe being scared together is better than being safe and alone." She looked up at him, her eyes still wet with tears. "What if we fail? Then we fail trying something beautiful instead of succeeding at something hollow." Rosalie kissed him, tasting salt and truth. "I love you, Ethan Sinclair. I love you enough to let you make this choice, even though it terrifies me. And I love you enough to know it is not a sacrifice. It is a gift." 6 months later, Ethan stood in the Seabrook Bay bookstore, wearing jeans and a sweater, his hands covered in paint. They were expanding, adding a coffee shop area where people could read and linger. He had sold his company to his top executives, keeping enough money to live comfortably but giving away most of his fortune to charities. Rosalie believed in his penthouse was sold. His sports cars were gone. His life of luxury and loneliness had been traded for something infinitely more valuable. Morning coffee with the woman he loved. Afternoons helping customers find the perfect book. Evenings walking on the beach, hand in hand. Talking about everything and nothing. The gossip articles had eventually stopped. His former world had moved on to the next scandal, the next target. And Ethan discovered that being forgotten by that world was the greatest freedom he had ever known. Rosalie peered beside him, paint smudged on her cheek, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked at the walls they were building together and smiled. "Oh, regrets?" she asked. Ethan pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "Not a single one." "You know what I realized?" "What?" "I spent my whole life building an empire, thinking that would make me matter. But I was wrong. Loving you, being loved by you, that is what makes me matter. Everything else was just noise." Rosalie wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her head against his chest. "You taught me something too. What is that?" "That it is never too late to choose differently. That walls can come down. That frozen hearts can learn to beat again." They stood there in the bookstore, surrounded by stories of other lives, other loves, other second chances. But this was their story now. Not perfect, not always easy, but real and beautiful in theirs. Ethan had asked about her secret that first day. The secret of how she stayed so hopeful, so kind, so open in a world that often rewarded none of those things. Now he knew. The secret was choosing love over fear, choosing vulnerability over safety, choosing connection over control. And in the end, her innocence had not shattered his control. It had shattered his chains, setting him free to become the man he was always meant to be. The end.